Blog Talk Radio.
This is the Light of Truth radio broadcast with Michael Boldea.
Welcome to the program, and thank you for joining us. This is the Light of Truth radio broadcast. I am your host, Michael Boldea, as the introduction so aptly stated. And thank you for tuning in. Thank you for listening to us. Thank you for listening on YouTube, wherever you may be listening from. I'm glad to know that I am not speaking into the ether, that someone actually takes as much time to listen to the words that I speak as I do speaking the words that I speak. Get it? Okay. We are not live today. My baby girl is sick. She has a fever and she has pretty gnarly cough. And the older one has no fever, but she does have a cough. So I don't know how bad it's going to get by tomorrow. So I thought I'd run into the studio and record the broadcast. So we're very close to live, but we're not quite live. Much has happened. We have much to discuss. Apparently, Nancy Pelosi has announced that there will be trial managers and whom the trial managers will be. And apparently it's the seven goofballs. It's Adam Schiff, the chair of the Intelligence Committee, a more oxymoronic title for such a, well, unintelligent man never existed. Of course, there's also Representative Jerry Nadler of New York, who is the chair of the Judiciary Committee. And they are among 7 prosecutors or managers who will see the case through. The case will be dead on arrival. At worst, at best, they'll actually have a trial and exonerate this president because no crime has been committed. You got to look at the list of individuals that have been called upon by history to, be the representatives that will prosecute this president, and you realize they're not taking this seriously. The other managers include Representative Hakeem Jeffries. Now, if I'm not mistaken, it was Mr. Hakeem Jeffries who, in a congressional hearing, went out of his way to inquire as to whether or not the island of Guam would tip over into the ocean if we brought any more heavy machinery. So this is the kind of IQ level we're dealing with. These are the people that have been put up as cannon fodder by one Nancy, my district is full of human feces, Pelosi, because she knows it's not going anywhere. Now, yes, there are people like Pierre Delecto himself. If you do not know who Pierre Delecto is, do your research. I always encourage it. But just to save some time, it is one Mittens Romney who had a secret Twitter account that praised Mittens Romney. If you want to understand psychosis on a whole new level in a whole new light, a senator of these United States, a man who ran for president, is so unsure of himself, is so in need of validation, is so in need of being in the spotlight, that he created a fake Twitter account, and with that fake Twitter account, praised Mittens Romney ceaselessly. A genius who ought to be president instead of that orange-haired buffoon, I say. So yes, Mitt Romney wants witnesses. I do too. But I don't just want the witnesses that Mitt Romney wants. If we're going to open this can of worms, kids, let's grab a spoon and dig in till we reach bottom. Till we scrape the other side of the can. Good. If we're going to go, let's go. Let's do it right. Let's do it all the way, because there's a lot of gnarly stuff in that can that's going to come out, that has to come out. Because the people of these United States need to understand that the political class not only believes itself to be superior to them, it takes what they pay in taxes and uses it as their own private piggy bank. They use the influence of the people of these United States to get for themselves, to get for their children, to get for their aunts and uncles and cousins and parents and daughters and sons, many, many dollars from many, many nations for no other reason than because they're in politics. So we're going to go through what Nancy Pelosi said about today, which is Wednesday. As I said, we're recording early. And anytime I hear Nancy Pelosi talk about the Constitution, my dry heaving kicks in. I have to fight back bile and hope that I don't throw up on my microphone. This is an important day, Nancy said with the requisite eye twitching and, the whole kabuki show that she puts on, because only the good Lord and her physician know how many medications this woman is on. But she says, this is an important day, Pelosi said as she stood alongside the prosecutors. Oh, by the way, let's get back to the prosecutors, because this is funny. So you have Representative Hakeem Jeffries, who, intellectually speaking, is Neanderthal adjacent. Let's call it that. You have Val Demings of Florida. You have Representative Jason Crow of Wisconsin. You have Representative Sylvia Garcia of Texas. And, of course, Zoe Lofgren of California. Now, one thing that needs to be pointed out is that other than Schiff and Nadler, there are no Democrat heavyweights that are coming near this thing with a 10-foot pole. Because they know how it's going to end. They already understand that the people don't want this. You have no evidence of a crime. You cannot create a crime out of whole cloth and accuse somebody of committing it, and then actually have the expectation that the president of the United States will be kicked out of office because of a crime that you made up. So they're using their second division, the guys that got drafted because, the team needed to spend a little money, but, they weren't going to be top tier anyway, so might as well throw them to the wolves. Notably, one of the prosecutors, Lofgren, has now played a role in 3 different impeachment processes. Of course they have. Trump's and those of former presidents Richard Nixon and Bill Clinton. So he's a youngin'. Following Pelosi's announcement, Trump tweeted, "Here we go again. Another con job by the do-nothing Democrats." You got to appreciate the man's succinct, explanation of the situation. All of this work was supposed to be done by the House, not the Senate, he writes. And by that, he means they want new witnesses, la, la, la. It's not going to go anywhere. This is not even what I want to focus on today. But I do want to focus on something that hopefully will open your eyes as to exactly what the other side thinks of you. Because even though we disagree politically with the other side, even though we believe that the lifestyle they practice is a sin, there is no rational Christian that believes all of these people should either be exterminated or brainwashed into believing the way they ought to believe because no dissenting opinion is allowed. The difference between this administration and, a Bernie Sanders administration is that in this administration you have a right to exist if you have a differing opinion. In Bernie's, you would not. And I realize, look, this is the problem with laughing somebody off. I'm sure that there were people in the pubs where Hitler started speaking, where Stalin started speaking, where Lenin was speaking, where Marx, this unwashed person who never had a job started jotting down notes in a notebook. I'm sure there were people that laughed and go, this is too crazy to catch traction. And yet here we are. So even though Bernie may seem like a doddering old fool worthy of a straitjacket and a white padded cell, he is dangerous. Not because of who he is, but because of his ideas, because of what he promotes. And because those that fall in line with what Bernie promotes have a certain mindset. Recently, an undercover video published by Project Veritas came out. And it was showing a field organizer for the Senator Bernie Sanders campaign of 2020 saying that Soviet gulags were actually a positive phenomenon and suggesting that some similar program could re-educate Trump supporters and billionaires. This is true. They have him on video. And if you don't know who Project Veritas is or what they do, they are doing good work. They're exposing these people for what they are. Not for what they project, not for what they want others to think they are, but for what they truly are. This is what they believe. And it's not something to laugh off, and it's not something to shrug off, and it's not something to roll our eyes over. Because God forbid this kind of person gets power, they will follow through. See, the problem is that they don't have an argument to defend their positions. And so when someone doesn't have an argument to defend their position, they have to do away with any pushback. They have to do away with any dissenting opinion. They have to do away with anyone that exposes the fallacy of their argument in the first place. So if I say the sun is purple, and somebody says, no, it's not, look, the sun is yellow. And I have no counter argument to that because I know, or maybe I don't, maybe I'm a true believer. Maybe I was born with some sort of color pigmentation over my eyes that really does see the sun purple. But because I have no counter argument, because it's a stalemate, the only thing I could rationally do is do away with the individual that made the counter argument to begin with. Socialism has never worked. Period. Full stop. That's it. Every time it's been tried, it ended in chaos. Every time it's been tried, it ended in poverty and hunger and genocide. And yet somehow these people are deluding themselves that if Bernie Sanders is helming the con, if Bernie Sanders becomes the captain of this ship, he can make socialism work. Now, admittedly, because of our patriarchal racist history, there will be some that will stand against Bernie's vision of utopia. And so what do we need to do with those people? Well, we need to re-educate them. And you know what? We have precedent. We have an example. We have a blueprint of how you re-educate someone. The Soviet gulags. Now there's Chinese camps currently that are re-educating people, wink, wink. So it's not as though the phenomenon of re-education has ceased. It's just gone underground. There was a YouTube video making its way around of a man who apparently all he did was post something negative about law enforcement in China. And it wasn't like, oh, all cops are bad. He was talking about how some policemen abused their power or something. And they showed a video of this man in this little cage with his knees together and his arms latched to this contraption. And they were interrogating him. And it didn't take very long for him to not only apologize and promise he'd never do it again, but sing the praises of the police. And I realize that some of you are rolling your eyes and saying, that could never happen here. The only way to keep it from happening here, once someone like Bernie Sanders or Pete Buttigieg or Elizabeth Warren gains power, is a full-blown revolution. That is the only way to keep it from happening here, because once they have the reins of power, they will not have the constant stumbling blocks that this administration has via the media, via, Congress people, via movie stars or whatever else you want to call it. The media will be behind it. Congress will be silent. And I will admit something, and it frustrates me. We don't have the taste for fight anymore. We don't have the stomach for it. Anytime we gain power, we try to use the coexist method. Every time they gain power, even just minuscule, they have a majority of 26 or 27 in the Congress. Even minuscule power, they try to cut your throat every time. If you're unwilling to bring a gun to a gunfight, then you're going to lose. If you're unwilling to meet your enemy on the battlefield of ideas, fully armed without holding back, then you're going to lose. That's why I think Paul Ryan was the worst thing to happen to the Republican Party in forever, because the man was milquetoast. We had the House, we had the Senate, and we didn't do anything. If these people gain power, you're getting a glimpse into their utopia. You're getting a glimpse into what they would like to see happen. And even though they might be eating tofu and soy and have a coexist sticker on their Prius, when it's just them among themselves, when they don't think anybody's listening, their true self comes out. And it's scary. Because if you've ever read anything regarding the Soviet gulags and the atrocities that took place there, there is no way, being a rational human being, you could ever conclude that it was a positive phenomenon. And yet, here's the field organizer for Senator Bernie Sanders of 2020 saying that Soviet gulags were actually a positive phenomenon, and suggesting that some similar program could re-educate Trump supporters and billionaires. The video begins with a Project Veritas journalist asking an individual identified as Sanders organizer Kyle Jurek if MAGA people could be re-educated if Sanders wins the White House. And this was his reply. This should send chills down your spine. If you're thinking to yourself, I don't like Trump's tweets, so I'm staying home. Or, he's not perfect, so I'm going to wait for a perfect candidate to shuffle myself out of the house and cast a vote. This is what these people believe. This is what these people desire. This is what these people want to do. The answer to the question, could we re-educate Trump supporters or MAGA people if Sanders wins the White House, was this. We got to try. In Nazi Germany, after the fall of the Nazi Party, there were a expletive ton of the populace that was expletive Nazified. So the man is borderline genius, apparently, with expletives. Because this is another thing you have to realize. It's not people with high IQs that buy into these things. Because people with high IQs or even average IQs reason things out. And they go, hold on, this doesn't make sense. It's people like this whose first resort is violence, whose first resort is stopping them, who can't go 3 seconds without throwing out an expletive. It's people like this that are buying into it. And he continues because, of course, he's a historical genius, among other things. Germany had to spend billions of dollars re-educating their expletive people to not be Nazis. That's not true. We're probably going to have to do the same expletive thing here. That's right. What happened to of the people, by the people, for the people? There's no such thing in Bernie's utopia, or in Buttigieg's utopia, or in Elizabeth Warren's utopia. No, we have to. We have to do the same thing here. We're going to have to re-educate the people that think the wrong way. And I use wrong in quotations. Scared yet? No? All right, we'll press on. Because it does get scarier. So you have someone that is fairly high up in Bernie Sanders' machine for the election of the presidency, and he's being very outspoken in telling you that if you don't agree with socialism, if you don't agree with the confiscation of your weapons, if you don't agree with universal health care, if you don't agree with a dystopia where the government can come and take everything you own and give it to someone else because you got to pay your fair share, then you are among those that need to be re-educated. You need to be brought to heel. You need to be taught what ideas you can have and what ideas you cannot have. And I love the fact that this buffoon of an individual is referencing the Nazis throughout all this. You are the Nazi, you soy eater. You are the Nazi. In another part of the video, Jurek hold on, let's go back because I missed the line. Because I'm not trying to scare you. The only thing that I really want to do is make sure that you go into 2020 with your eyes open and realize what's at stake. That's it. I'm not trying to sway you one way or another. These are facts, not feelings. Because, what was it I read yesterday? And this was supposedly in Time magazine or some distinguished publication talking about how transgender men not only feel the pain of menstruation, but the emotional toll. Let that sink in. This is the society we've allowed to grow and metastasize in our midst because nobody is willing to say, that's insane. You need help. You need a doctor. You need medication. No, A man, biological man, cannot feel the pains of menstruation. It's utter insanity, but hey, we're going along with it. Because as small of a minority as they are, man, they're really loud. And for some reason, we've allowed cowardice to creep into our midst, and we're unwilling to say anything. We cover our mouths and stop up our ears, and this is what's coming. This is what is coming. If you do not fully agree with Bernie Sanders and all of his lunatic ideas, you need to be re-educated. That's the only option we have. And this buffoon of a man continues, and he says, that's kind of what all Bernie's whole expletive, like, hey, free education for everybody, because we're going to have to teach you not to be an expletive Nazi, he added. So in this man's marijuana-induced brain pan, when Bernie's talking about free education, technically it's free re-education. So it's not college or, I don't know, a trade school. It's teaching you the surf. It's teaching you the number on a spreadsheet who's supposed to send his hard-earned money in to finance Bernie's dream. How to think the right way. That's what Bernie means, this man believes, by free education. So, if you've ever had, a negative thought about socialism and its glories, if you've ever had a negative thought about the idea of being taxed until your nose bleeds, so that someone who isn't working, who chooses not to work, who chooses not to participate or labor, gets a portion of your earnings just because, fairness, then you need to be re-educated. See, a lot of people can't wrap their minds around the idea of civil unrest in this country. A lot of people can't wrap their minds around the idea of revolution in this country. Well, as we continue down this article, you'll see the potentiality of both. Whichever way this swings, there is a potential for violence and civil unrest, because this neutered piglet, this waste of human tissue and oxygen, goes on to say that if Bernie loses, it's all burning, man. We're going to burn this to the ground and everything. And again, it's easy to look at these people and laugh. It's easy to look at them and roll your eyes until you look at history and you realize that it only takes one misstep. It only takes one moment of inattentiveness. And once they gain power, they have it, and they won't give it up. You take your eyes off the ball for a second, and you have someone like Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez getting elected into the Congress of the United States. You take your eyes off the ball for a second, and you have someone like Ilhan Omar, the openly anti-Israel, pro-Muslim, America-hating congressperson, who now has to hide behind the falsity of having PTSD from her childhood. This is why she tweets anti-Jewish things. This is why she says that Soleimani was a beloved figure. As Bernie said, he was what? A foreign official. Understand that if these people continue to gain traction, if these people gain power, your way of life not only ends, if you are in any way vocal or if you in any way were known as someone who didn't fully back the lunacies that someone like Bernie is peddling, you're getting re-educated. It's for your own good. Because, see, once you're re-educated, then you can be like all the Romanians were when Ceausescu used to come to town. They used to make you go out into the streets and line the corridors, and everybody had flowers in their hands that communist officials passed out. And even though their bellies were rumbling, and even though they were just contemplating whether or not to jump in front of a train, whenever Ceausescu would come to town, oh boy, did everyone seem chipper. It was as though he was the greatest thing since sliced bread. And it was all a farce. That's exactly the same thing that happened in Iran with Soleimani's funeral. You have to understand what totalitarian regimes are capable of. Once you understand that, then you understand that a lot of the things that we think are going on are simply optics. I guarantee you, nobody loved Soleimani so much that they voluntarily allowed themselves to be trampled to death at his funeral. But if you don't go out in the street and start mourning like you mean it, maybe tonight, maybe tomorrow, someone's going to pay you a visit. And then you're really going to mourn. Or maybe tomorrow morning when you go back to work, someone will have made a phone call. And you will no longer be employed. And if you are no longer employed by the state, you no longer receive benefits from the state. And because the state runs everything, you and your family will starve. So wouldn't you rather just fall in line? Wouldn't you rather just play along? Wouldn't you rather just go out and pretend like you're mourning the death of a barbarian? And that way, CNN gets its clips. That way, Chris Matthews can compare Soleimani and his death to the death of Princess Di and Martin Luther King. I'm surprised. Honestly, I'm surprised that one of these people didn't go as far as Jesus. It wouldn't have been a big leap. I was waiting for one of them to go, look at this. This is like when Jesus died. When you have what is supposed to be news, which is delivering information on something that occurred, becoming propaganda, meaning that the talking heads on television are steering you towards an opinion. They're steering you towards which way to think. They're steering you to what and how you should react to what they're telling you. Then we're treading very dangerous ground, and it's the type of ground that gets people like Bernie Sanders elected. Because these people are being untruthful. They are the enemies of the people. But let's continue with this undercover investigation and all the things that were said, because it doesn't end here. This young man, this likely vegan who is lactose intolerant and gluten-free, is going to teach you not to be a Nazi. But the Nazis were socialists. Huh? You didn't know that? Oh, yeah. National Socialist Party. The Nazis were exactly what Bernie Sanders wants this nation to become. The Nazis were socialists. But that doesn't get a lot of airplay. Why? It's in the history books. You can Google it. And yet, Don the homosexual Lemon and Andrew the homosexual Cooper and soon to be Chef the homosexual Schmidt or Smith is going to be on MSNBC. They're all towing the same line. Maybe we should give it a chance. You know, it can't be all that bad. It's about equality. Equally distribute everything, and then everyone will be equally miserable. And by the way, just as an aside, I just keep an eye on it so that you understand why people do what they do. Now, there's two really anti-Trump people on Fox News. And they're getting more and more insane. One of them is Andrew Napolitano, the guy that looks like sort of Frankenstein's monster. And I forget who the other one is. But I guarantee you that within 6 months, they will leave Fox and go to work for either CNN, MSNBC, or one of these other networks. What they're doing is auditioning for a new job and better pay. It's not their belief that Trump did something wrong and that Nancy has every right to see this through. They're auditioning. Everything is corrupt. From media to Washington, D.C., and everything in between, it is corrupt. This is why I am surprised and in awe that this administration has been able to do what it has thus far because of how many powerful people and you know, government bureaucracies stand against it. But let's get back to this young man and see what his plan for you is. In another part of the video, Jurek is seen discussing Soviet Union dictator Joseph Stalin's use of gulags, where he claims that the CIA was overly critical of them. Yes. How dare we be critical of Stalin's gulags, which were mostly in Siberia, where any political dissenter, anyone who didn't agree with Stalin's utopia, sort of like Bernie's utopia, was sent there to die. That was it. If you didn't die fast enough by starvation and cold, well, then you got a bullet in the face. Because the gulag was nothing more than a death camp without the ovens. But let's continue and peruse, peek, if you will, into the mind of this vegan soy individual. People, he says, were actually paid a living wage in the gulags. They have conjugal visits in the gulags. Gulags were meant for re-education, he says. You, sir, are a moron with a capital M. You should never, ever in your life be anywhere close to the reins of power. You should be thrice removed from even being a meter maid. Never mind someone in federal government. Because I guarantee you this is his dream. If Bernie gets in, he's going to be somewhere in the top tier. Because, hey, He helped get Bernie elected. You see, because it's not about meritocracy. Especially in Bernie's utopia, it's not about meritocracy. It's about who can be the best lick spittle. Who can toe the line the best. And this young man has what it takes, as a Russian would say. The gulags were not bad. Look, you get paid living wage. You have conjugal visit. You are just being re-educated. Why do you not like Stalin? Please tell me, why do you not like Stalin? Sometimes to make an omelet, you have to break the eggs, you know? I'm sorry your mother and your uncle and your aunt and your wife and your daughter die of starvation. I'm sorry, okay? But imagine how beautiful Russia will be once we finish the plan, huh? All you have to do is say, I love Stalin. And then you go home to empty house. You go home to empty house with no job and no food and no family because they all dead of starvation. But all you have to do is say, I love Stalin. So that's what happened in gulags. It was just re-education. This young man would know. Because living in mom's basement and having internet access makes you a genius. All right, let's keep going. Because it gets better. Jurek is then seen suggesting that the most effective way to re-educate the billionaire class is to order them to break rocks for 12 hours a day. Again, might I remind this young man that these United States and the government thereof is for the people, by the people, and yet this is what a tyrant thinks like. This is the mind of a full-blown tyrannical dictator. You fall in line or you're going to hurt. So, you know, if we want to re-educate the billionaire class, because there's so many of them, come on. Order them to break rocks for 12 hours a day. Now, I have a question. 'Tis an intellectual exercise, if you will. If you are ordered by Jerky Jim and his soy breath to break rocks for 12 hours, and you politely decline, you know, sciatica, bad back, do you think he'll just say, okay, and walk away? No. If you do not comply, if you do not assimilate, you will be punished. And eventually, if your disobedience is grievous enough, and someone like this young man who is obviously impotent and has never held any modicum of power, gets the power to have a say over whether you live or die, he will watch you being executed and smile. The greatest way to break an expletive billionaire of their privilege and their idea that they're superior, go and break rocks for 12 hours a day. You're now a working class person and you're going to expletive learn what that means, right? Well, the problem, you mental midget, is that most of the billionaires worked and sacrificed and labored in order to achieve billionaire status. It's not like a magic fairy came down and said, you're a billionaire and you're a billionaire. You don't have to do anything for it. They risked. And because their risk paid off, they were rewarded handsomely. So they know what it means to be working class. They were likely working class at some point. But this nation afforded them the opportunity to use their skills, to use their ingenuity, to use their imagination, and amass a fortune based on meritocracy. This should disturb you. The fact that people like this are anywhere close to levers of power should really, really disturb you. The video also shows Zurich warning that Milwaukee, host of this year's Democratic National Convention. I live near Milwaukee, by the way. A couple of friends went to the rally the other night because Trump was in town. I am not looking forward to going anywhere near Milwaukee during the DNC convention because at this juncture, I get the distinct feeling that it's probably going to be a brokered convention. And somebody might just try to Hail Mary Hillary Clinton in. And if that happens, look, the Bernie bros already feel as though they're disenfranchised, already feel as though they haven't gotten a fair shake. And let's see what Mr. Jurek says might happen to Milwaukee if, Bernie fails to win the party's nomination, because it's not about votes and it's not about, who's most popular. It's Bernie or nobody. And if it's not Bernie, then you know what? We gonna just burn it down. We gonna burn it down. That's, genius level psychosis. The video also shows Zurich warning that Milwaukee, host of this year's Democratic National Convention, will burn if Sanders fails to win the party's nomination. If Bernie doesn't get the nomination or it goes to a second round at the DNC convention, expletive Milwaukee will burn, says Jurek. It'll start in Milwaukee, and then when the police push back on that, other sites will expletive explode. So, I have a bit of advice for law enforcement in Milwaukee because Bernie is not going to be the nominee. Bernie Sanders is a lunatic. Bernie Sanders can never win a national election. It would be a wipeout. And so the powers that be at the DNC will do their best to try to keep Bernie away from it. But, and however, to the law enforcement of Milwaukee County, once it is evident that Bernie is not the one that's going to win or that it'll go to a second round at the convention, when the limp-wristed faction of Bernie Bros, being weakened in Boldea from overconsumption of soy and tofu, attempt to set their first flame, be ruthless in the way that you dispatch with them. Make an example. Because if you don't, what Mr. Jurek said will come to pass. This is the only thing that people like Mr. Zurich understand. When you start to break the law, make the fact that you broke the law so painful that all the other idiots and half-tards that are behind you will think twice. Be brutal about it. Because that's the only way you can stop it before it ever starts. Now, the footage concludes with Zurich issuing the chilling prediction that Milwaukee could see riots akin to the 1968 convention in Chicago. I know for those of you that are apolitical, who think the same, it's all the same, both sides are the same. When was the last Republican convention riot? I'm waiting. When did attendees of the Republican convention get so distraught that Ross Perot didn't win the nomination, or that, I don't know, whoever, that they went out and burnt the city that was hosting them? No, never? Because, see, this is another thing that the propagandists love to do. They love to broad brush and say, oh, all the same, all the same. Is there really that much difference between Republican policy and the Democrat policy? I mean, would it really be that bad to have a Bernie Sanders as president? Yes, it would be. And right now, a lot of the media... Do you remember Baghdad Bob? Because I do. It was back during the unpleasantness with Saddam Hussein. And Baghdad Bob was the guy that would come on television and explain how they'd pushed back the infidels, how the Americans were running scared, how Saddam had won the day, how nevermore shall an American set foot upon Iraqi soil. And at one point, it's as he was talking, you could see in the background just American tanks and heavy machinery going by. This is the same position that the media to date is in. They're telling you lies that you can see on their face to be lies. But they're insisting that they're telling you the truth. We have a plethora of Baghdad Bobs trying to get our attention every single day. And all you have to do is open your eyes and see for yourself that what they're telling you is a lie. So back to the conclusion of Mr. Zurich and his chilling prediction. He said that Milwaukee could see riots akin to the 1968 convention in Chicago, where left-wing activists engaged in violent riots in the streets. Be ready to be in Milwaukee for the DNC convention. We're going to make 1968 look like an expletive Girls Scout expletive cookout. Now, I've seen a picture of Mr. Zurich. I have read his "I'm such a tough guy" rhetoric. And I can promise you, Mr. Zurich's never taken a punch. Mr. Zurich's never been in a fight. If I were a betting man, I would wager that my wife could beat the snot out of Mr. Zurich to the point that he's in a fetal position, sucking his own thumb. The problem is that impotent individuals like Mr. Zurich allow others to egg them on, and they egg others on to the point that they will not be shamed by not doing what they promised they would do. So unless law enforcement in Milwaukee County ends it quickly, I do believe that Mr. Jurek's prediction is likely. Because as yet, no, Bernie Sanders isn't going to win the nomination. It doesn't matter how far left you are. It doesn't matter. It's not going to happen. Because at the end of the day, these people want to beat Donald Trump. And Bernie Sanders isn't going to do it. Now, again, the Baghdad Bobs will tell you that there are some who might have a chance in the remaining field. No, the only one that can beat Donald Trump at this juncture is Donald Trump. That's the truth. But they're going to keep banging the drums for the next, 10 months, trying to distract you, keep you on edge. Don't let them win. That's my conclusion for today. The more they try to keep you on edge, the more you should retain your peace. The more the talking heads and the Baghdad Bobs tell you that this is it, this is the end, look around and realize that it's not. Because when someone's on edge, when someone is constantly fearful, they're more pliable. It's easier to control someone who is afraid than someone who isn't. And at the end of the day, when the smoke clears and all is said and done, it's still about control. Because only when you have control can you implement the policies that Mr. Jurek dreams of. Only then can you open up your own gulags and make the dissenters break rocks for 12 hours. Thank you all for listening. May God bless you. May God keep you. And keep my daughters in your prayer. The flu has been going around. It's been ugly. And I don't like seeing my kids sick. So, again, thank you. This has been The Light of Truth. And now, Gino, if you've got anything to say, the floor is yours.
Yeah, last night we went to the rally, and Vice President Pence was there, and he spoke and basically stated how their party is pro-life, trying to enact laws that are pro-life. And it was refreshing to actually hear the element of commitment that leaders are trying to make in the Republican Party to overturn the pro-death laws that have happened in Illinois, New York. Obviously, Virginia, the governor there wanted to go further than infanticide, and Oregon and California. And then President Trump spoke last night, and the feeling is very obvious on all ends that if we would lose the conservative powers and leaders in America, our country would be shipwrecked in short time. And the liberal agenda is out to kill as many preborn as they can, keep legalizing marijuana, keep fighting against faith-based initiatives of protecting the preborn, traditional family, and other values. And our country is in the balance, and it's a bit of an Esther moment for such a time as this, that the church gets out and gets proactive. And voting is a privilege of us as a nation, as a free country, and we really need to get out and encourage churches and others to support conservative causes and opportunities that we have. Keep our leaders in prayer. Not only that, the state of Wisconsin leaders, many of them are opposing a very liberal governor, Tony Evers. And so we really need you to pray that our country will fight hard in 2020 to maintain and to keep being committed to conservative and faith-based values. Again, you can check out our website, handofhelp.com. Thank you for listening to the Light of Truth broadcast. Thank you for listening to today's broadcast, The Light of Truth with Michael Boldea. If you would like to order a copy of today's broadcast, please visit our website at handofhelp.com. If you have questions about our ministry, you can email us at handofhelpoffice@aol.com or simply call us at 920-206-9910. God bless you.